I didn't expect, where you go after Betty White.
Well, Betty is evil.
My defense is that I've been working. I've been out of the country. I didn't have a publicist and didn't really have a chance to defend myself.
When news broke that Val Kilmer had died, the reaction across Hollywood was immediate and emotional. For decades, Kilmer had been one of the most recognizable and unpredictable actors in the film industry, a performer capable of transforming himself completely for every role he played. From intense dramas to blockbuster hits, his presence on screen always carried a certain electricity that audiences couldn't ignore. So when the announcement came that he had passed away at the age of 65, fans around the world were left stunned. The official explanation seemed straightforward. Reports stated that complications from pneumonia had taken his life. For many people, it sounded tragically believable. After all, Kilmer had spent years battling serious health issues following his diagnosis with throat cancer. His body had already endured radiation, chemotherapy, and surgeries that permanently altered his voice and weakened his immune system. Pneumonia, in such a fragile condition, seemed like a cruel but logical ending to a long and exhausting fight. But almost immediately, something about the story began to feel incomplete. Tributes began flooding the internet within hours of the announcement. Actors, directors, musicians, and fans all shared memories of Kilmer's incredible career. Clips from some of his most iconic films were reposted across social media. Fans remembered the icy confidence of his character in Top Gun, the haunting transformation he delivered in The Doors, and the unforgettable performance as Doc Holliday in Tombstone. To many people, those roles weren't just performances, they were pieces of cinematic history. One of the most emotional tributes came from longtime colleagues who had worked with Kilmer during the peak of his career. Some described him as brilliant and fearless, while others remembered his intense dedication to every role he accepted. He was known for pushing himself further than most actors would dare, sometimes immersing himself so deeply into characters that it blurred the line between acting and living the role. But alongside the admiration, there was always another side to Kilmer's reputation. Stories from film sets had circulated for years, suggesting he could be difficult, demanding, and fiercely opinionated. Some directors admired his commitment to authenticity, while others found his perfectionism exhausting. Even so, few could deny his talent. Over time, Kilmer had become something of a mystery in Hollywood, a star who once dominated the box office but gradually faded from the spotlight. After his cancer diagnosis became public in 2017, many fans saw him in a new light. The illness had taken away one of his most powerful tools as an actor, his voice. A tracheotomy left him speaking in a faint whisper, and everyday activities became more physically exhausting. Yet despite those challenges, Kilmer continued to create. In 2021, he released the deeply personal documentary, Val, which revealed never-before-seen footage from his life and career. The film showed a side of him that the public rarely saw, vulnerable, reflective, and deeply emotional about the life he had lived. For many viewers, the documentary felt like a farewell letter. Then came his appearance in Top Gun Maverick in 2022. It was a moment that instantly moved audiences around the world. Decades after the original film, Kilmer returned to the role of Iceman, sharing one final emotional scene with Tom Cruise. The moment was brief, but it carried enormous weight. For fans who had followed his career for decades, it felt like the closing chapter of a remarkable story. At the time, it looked like a triumphant return, but in reality, things were far more complicated. In the months leading up to his death, Kilmer had quietly disappeared from public life once again. Public appearances became rare. Interviews stopped completely. Even some people close to him later admitted they hadn't spoken with him for long periods of time. At first, no one thought much of it. Kilmer had always been a private person, someone who valued solitude and preferred to keep his personal struggles out of the spotlight. But after his death, small details began to surface that painted a far more troubling picture. Some friends revealed that Kilmer had become increasingly isolated in the last year of his life. Calls went unanswered. Invitations were declined. He spent long stretches alone at home, focusing on painting and writing rather than socializing with the outside world. At the same time, rumors began circulating among journalists that there was more to the story of his death than the public had been told. And then, weeks later, a document surfaced that would send a shockwave through Hollywood. It was the official autopsy report. At first glance, the report confirmed what everyone already believed: pneumonia complications in a weakened body. But buried deeper within the medical findings were details that left even experienced reporters unsettled. Because the report didn't just describe how Val Kilmer died, it revealed what he had been going through in the final months of his life, and the truth was far more disturbing than anyone expected. Long before the disturbing details surrounding his final days came to light, Val Kilmer had already lived one of the most fascinating and unpredictable careers in Hollywood. He wasn't just another actor chasing fame. From the very beginning, Kilmer carried a kind of intensity that made people pay attention. Directors noticed it, audiences felt it, and fellow actors often described it as both inspiring and intimidating. Born in Los Angeles in 1959, Kilmer grew up surrounded by the creative energy of Southern California. Acting became his passion early in life, and he pursued it with the kind of dedication rarely seen in someone so young. That dedication paid off when he became one of the youngest students ever accepted into the prestigious drama program at Juilliard. For an aspiring actor, it was one of the most respected training grounds in the world. At Juilliard, Kilmer quickly developed a reputation for his deep commitment to his craft. He wasn't interested in simply memorizing lines and delivering performances. He wanted to understand every emotion, every motive, every detail behind a character. That intensity would later become both his greatest strength and at times the source of conflict throughout his career. His breakthrough in Hollywood came in the mid-1980s with the quirky comedy Top Secret. The film allowed Kilmer to show off both his comedic timing and his natural charisma. But it was only the beginning. 2 years later, he landed the role that would change everything. In 1986, Kilmer appeared in Top Gun as Tom "Iceman" Kazansky, the cool and confident rival to Tom Cruise's Maverick. The character was sharp, competitive, and effortlessly commanding. While Cruise was the star of the film, many viewers couldn't stop talking about the calm, calculated pilot who seemed to steal every scene he appeared in. The film became a global phenomenon, and overnight, Kilmer found himself among Hollywood's most sought-after actors. But unlike many rising stars, Kilmer refused to settle into a predictable career path. Instead of repeating the same type of roles, he deliberately chose projects that challenged him. That decision led to one of the most extraordinary performances of his career, when he portrayed legendary rock singer Jim Morrison in the 1991 biographical film The Doors. The transformation was astonishing. Kilmer didn't just act like Morrison, he studied him obsessively. He memorized the singer's movements, adopted his speaking patterns, and even recorded demo tracks in Morrison's voice so convincingly that members of the real band reportedly struggled to tell the difference. For many fans, it remains one of the most immersive performances in music biopic history. Yet even that performance was soon overshadowed by another unforgettable role. In 1993, Kilmer starred in Tombstone as the legendary gunslinger Doc Holliday. Sickly, sarcastic, and razor-sharp, the character became an instant classic. Kilmer's delivery of Holliday's witty and often chilling lines turned the role into one of the most quoted performances in Western film history. By the mid-1990s, Kilmer had firmly established himself as one of Hollywood's biggest stars. He even stepped into the cape and cowl as the Dark Knight in Batman Forever. At the time, the film was a massive box office success, and Kilmer's career seemed unstoppable. But behind the scenes, the narrative was beginning to change. As Kilmer's reputation for intense dedication grew, so did rumors about his behavior on film sets. Some directors admired his passion and his refusal to compromise on performance quality. Others described him as stubborn, unpredictable, and sometimes difficult to manage. Stories circulated about creative disagreements during productions, particularly on challenging film sets where tensions were already high. Some filmmakers claimed Kilmer pushed too hard to control scenes, while others argued that his passion simply clashed with the pressures of big-budget filmmaking. Kilmer himself often rejected the negative labels. In later interviews, he explained that he saw himself as a perfectionist, someone who cared deeply about the artistic side of acting and refused to treat films like routine jobs. Whether misunderstood or genuinely difficult, the perception stuck. By the early 2000s, Kilmer's career began shifting away from major blockbuster roles. He still acted frequently, appearing in a wide range of films and projects. But the spotlight that once followed him everywhere had started to dim. To fans, it felt like a mysterious transformation. How could someone so talented, someone capable of delivering such unforgettable performances, slowly drift away from Hollywood's biggest stages? For years, the reasons remained unclear. Some blamed industry politics. Others believed Kilmer had simply grown tired of the relentless demands of fame. But behind the scenes, another battle was quietly beginning, one that would change his life forever. Around the mid-2010s, subtle signs began to worry those who followed his career closely. During rare public appearances, Kilmer's voice sounded strained and raspy. His physical appearance had changed noticeably, and rumors about his health began circulating online. At first, Kilmer strongly denied those reports. Whenever journalists asked about his condition, he insisted there was nothing seriously wrong. But the truth was far more serious than anyone realized, and when it finally emerged, it would reveal that the legendary actor who once dominated the screen was now fighting a battle far more difficult than any role he had ever played. A battle that would eventually lead to the painful and shocking revelations uncovered after his death. By the mid-2010s, something about Val Kilmer had clearly changed. Fans who had followed his career for decades began noticing small but troubling differences whenever he appeared in public. His voice sounded rough, sometimes barely audible. Interviews became shorter and less frequent. Photos showed a man who looked thinner and more fragile than the confident Hollywood star people remembered. At first, the changes were subtle enough that many people ignored them. After all, actors age, careers evolve, and public appearances naturally become less frequent over time. But as months passed, the rumors surrounding Kilmer's health began to grow louder. Some reports suggested he had been hospitalized. Others claimed he was dealing with a serious illness. Yet whenever questions reached him, Kilmer firmly denied that anything major was wrong. He insisted that the rumors were exaggerated and that he was doing fine. For years, the truth remained hidden. Then in 2017, Kilmer finally revealed what had really been happening behind the scenes. He confirmed that he had been battling throat cancer, a diagnosis that had already forced him through years of intense medical treatment. Radiation therapy, chemotherapy, and surgery had saved his life, but the cost was enormous. One of the most devastating consequences was the tracheotomy he underwent during treatment. The procedure permanently changed the way he spoke. The deep, powerful voice that once carried through performances in films like The Doors and Tombstone was reduced to a faint whisper. For an actor whose career depended on expression and dialogue, it was an almost unimaginable loss. But Kilmer refused to see himself as a victim. Instead of retreating completely, he began finding new ways to tell his story. In 2021, he released the deeply personal documentary Val. The film was unlike anything audiences had seen before. Built from decades of home video footage that Kilmer had recorded throughout his life, it offered a raw and intimate look at his journey from a young aspiring actor to an international movie star, and eventually to a man fighting for his health. The documentary revealed moments of joy, frustration, ambition, and vulnerability. Viewers saw Kilmer not as the untouchable celebrity from blockbuster films, but as a deeply human figure grappling with change, loss, and resilience. Many fans were moved by how open he appeared in the film. Yet even in that personal documentary, there were still parts of his life that remained private. Because although Kilmer had survived cancer, the battle had left his body permanently weakened. His breathing was often difficult. Eating became a challenge. Everyday activities that most people never think twice about required patience and effort. The treatments that had saved him also left his immune system fragile, meaning even minor illnesses could become dangerous. Despite all of that, Kilmer continued searching for moments of purpose. Then in 2022, he gave fans something they never expected. He returned to the role that had helped define his career. When Top Gun: Maverick was released, audiences were thrilled to see Kilmer appear once again as Iceman. Decades had passed since the original Top Gun, and many wondered if the reunion between Iceman and Maverick would ever happen. The scene, when it finally arrived, was brief but incredibly emotional. In the story, Iceman communicates mostly through typing because his illness has taken away his ability to speak freely. But at one moment, he gathers the strength to say a few words directly to Maverick, played again by Tom Cruise. The moment was powerful, not just because of the characters, but because audiences understood the real story behind it. Kilmer's voice had been recreated with the help of advanced digital technology, blending recordings from his earlier performances with modern voice reconstruction software. The result allowed him to deliver lines that sounded closer to the voice fans remembered. When the scene played in theaters, many viewers were brought to tears. It felt like more than a performance. It felt like a farewell. Behind the scenes, however, the reality was far more difficult. Those involved in the production later revealed that filming Kilmer's scenes required careful planning. His physical strength was limited, and even short moments on camera could leave him exhausted. The filmmakers worked around his health limitations to ensure he could appear in the film without placing too much strain on him. Still, Kilmer was determined to do it. For him, returning to Iceman wasn't just about nostalgia or fan service. It was about closing a chapter of his life, revisiting a character that had helped define his career and saying goodbye on his own terms. After the film's release, many fans believed they had witnessed a triumphant comeback. But in reality, Kilmer's life was quietly entering its final stage. Following the success of Top Gun: Maverick, he once again withdrew from public life. Interviews became rare. Public appearances almost completely stopped. He spent most of his time at home, focusing on art, writing, and spending time with his children. Friends later described those years as peaceful, but increasingly isolated. Kilmer had always valued privacy, but now that instinct seemed stronger than ever. He rarely discussed his health, even with people close to him. Many assumed he was simply enjoying a quieter life after decades in the spotlight. What they didn't realize was that his health was continuing to decline. The effects of cancer treatment had left lasting damage that slowly worsened over time. His immune system remained fragile. Everyday illnesses carried serious risks. And according to information that would later appear in the medical report after his death, the challenges he faced during those final months were far greater than most people realized. When news finally broke that Kilmer had died in 2025, The public explanation seemed clear: pneumonia complications. But as investigators and medical examiners began reviewing the details of his condition, they discovered something deeply unsettling. Because the illness that officially ended his life was only part of the story. Hidden beneath the surface were signs that Kilmer had been suffering far more than anyone outside his private circle had ever known. And when the autopsy findings were finally released, the revelations would leave fans and even some of those closest to him shocked by what had really been happening during the final chapter of his life.